Morning, students. How are you all? We are reading Thomas Gray's poem Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Let's continue the poem. For who to dumb forgetfulness a prey, displeasing, anxious being ever resigned, left the warm precincts of the cheerful day, nor cast one longing, lingering look behind. The poet asks a question in this stanza. Is there any human being who, while dying, does not have the desire to be remembered after death? This life has its pleasures and its pains. Was there ever a man who, while giving up this life, wished to be utterly ignored and forgotten? No, certainly no. Nobody, while making his exit from this bright sunlit world, could ever reconcile himself to being completely forgotten. Every dying man casts a regretful look upon this world and wishes to be remembered after his death in some form or the other. A dying man would no doubt become the victim of oblivion, but he wants that a memory of his wants his memory to remain in the form of a memorial or an elegy or an engraving on his tombstone. On some fond breast the parting soul relies, some pious drops the closing eye requires. Even from the tomb the voice of nature cries, even in our ashes live their wonted fires. This stanza may be regarded as an answer to the question contained in the preceding stanza. When dying, a man seeks comfort and consolation from some loving friend or relative. The presence of a loving friend by the bedside is a great comfort to the dying man. The dying man needs tears of affection and sympathy from his near and dear ones, even when one is dead and buried. The same natural desire for loving remembrance is felt by the departed soul. When all is dust and ashes, the keen desire for remembrance that lived in the body still lives on, and finds expression in the inscriptions on the tombs. Thus, everyone yearns for some kindly, loving remembrance while a spark of life yet remains in him. Even after the spark of life has been extinguished, even when all is dust and ashes, that yearning must still be felt. So, the idea of this stanza is that the desire for affection, sympathy, and remembrance can never die. For thee who, mindful of the unhonored dead, dost in these lines their artless tale relate, if chance by lonely contemplation led, some kindred spirit shall inquire thy fate. Now, in this stanza, the poet turns to himself and thinks of his own death. Addressing himself, he says that he has not ignored the humble and unknown men who lie buried in this churchyard. He has taken notice of these men and has, in the present poem, narrated their simple story. In other words, he has written an elegy to commemorate them. It is quite possible that one day somebody with a temperament similar to that of the poet would, in a mood of lonely reflection, make inquiries about the poet's fate. The idea is that when the poet dies, some other poet might ask questions about him from the inhabitants of this village. Haply some hoary-headed, hoary means whose hair has turned grey. Haply some hoary-headed swain may say, oft have we seen him at the peep of dawn, brushing with hasty steps the dews away, to meet the sun upon the upland lawn. In reply to the inquiry of some kindred spirit, some aged villager with grey hair on his head would perhaps make the following reply: we have often seen the man you are inquiring about, that the poet of this poem, Thomas Gray. Every day at dawn we used to see him. walking quickly over the dew covered ground to climb up the hill in order to watch the sun rising. There at the foot of There at the foot of yonder means there at the foot of yonder nodding beech that reads its old fantastic roots so high, his listless length at noontide would he stretch and pour upon the brook that babbles by. Hard by yon wood, now smiling as in scorn, muttering his wayward fancies, he would rove, now drooping, woeful wan, like one forlorn or crazed with care or crossed in hopeless love. Now, continuing his reply, the hoary-headed, the grey-headed, the swain, swain means shepherd, whose hair has turned grey, an old swain, an old shepherd, will say that at noontime, during the afternoon, Thomas Gray was in the habit of stretching his tired, weary body at the foot of that beech tree with its branches hanging downwards and its roots standing up above the ground. Twisted into strange shape, lying under the tree, he used to gaze thoughtfully at the stream that flows close by with a murmuring sound. Hard by yon wood, now smiling as in scorn, muttering his wayward fancies, he would rove, now drooping, woeful, wan, like one forlorn or crazed with care or crossed in hopeless love. That hoary-headed swain, that grey-haired shepherd, informing the inquirer, will say, or may say, Thomas Gray was, or the poet of this elegy was, in the habit of roaming about near the wood there. While walking about, he used to speak out his whimsical ideas and fantastic notions to himself. And as he walked, thus he sometimes smiled scornfully, and sometimes he looked sorrowful and pale, with his head hanging downwards, like a man who is lonely and friendless, or like a man who is tormented by some anxiety, or like one who is completely frustrated in love. So, the poet expresses a mood of loneliness, a mood of melancholy, sadness, and sorrowfulness about himself. So, rest of the poem we will discuss in our next lecture, lecture 5. Thank you for listening.